All right, guys, let's get to a show on the road here. I want to welcome everyone. Hello and welcome. My name is Tom Morris. I'm the director of athletic performance at Indiana University, and we got five incredible speakers today. And these speakers have prepared stuff that's unique to what they wanted to talk about. And before I get into introducing our speakers and who they are, I want to give you a little bit of context of what we're trying to do with this, what we're calling access talks right now. So each one of these talks are prepared uniquely from what the speaker wants to talk about, but they're going to range from everything from X's and O's of strength training to just leadership and life skills throughout whatever they chose to talk about. The unique part of all of this, though, is every one of these speeches, every one of these presentations are going to be under the 10-minute mark. So if you think of it, it's kind of like that TED Talk feel. They're going to be these micro doses of just some really great content that is there to spur up, maybe different perspectives. Maybe they're the catalyst to make you thinking a little bit different. Whatever it may be, I just encourage you guys to hear these and then maybe reach out and talk to these coaches more and more and seek out and find out even some deeper and better answers with that. We're going to do these every Wednesday, and we're going to have anywhere between 4 and 6 different speakers on there, minutes at a time or less, but within that hour time frame on there. Couple things. If you would just keep your Zooms on mute. And then the other thing is, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. We're going to try and send this out to the speakers the following day, and then hopefully get some answers to a lot of the questions that you may have, because I don't think we're going to have any kind of time today with that. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into just introducing who our speakers are today and the flow that we're going to have. First one up is going to be Will Ali of Indiana University. Second on there is going to be Scott Caulfield, College. Third is going to be Megan Young of the Chicago Red Stars. Fourth is going to be Kevin Kunapasek out of Indiana University. And then rounding out the day is going to be Ron McKeefery out of Fresno State University. Speakers, I want to thank you all for joining us today and putting together these presentations. We're super excited to hear what you all have to say. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, Coach Will Ali. Will?
Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody's able to hear me. Like Tom said, we'll stick to the format. It's really just going to be 10 minutes here, but I'll kind of go through a presentation, share my screen with you, if that's all right, and then we can move on from there. All right, so like Tom said, my name is William Ali. I'm the athletic performance coach at Indiana University. I started my collegiate career at Brock University, actually, where I was referred to as the basketball guy. Over the years, I took on a number of names that sure some of you are familiar with. Until recently, I'm referred to as the baseball guy, simply by association. All those names are somewhat fitting, but what I like to tell athletes is I'm just a guy trying to make the world a better place. Simply put, I try to use strength and conditioning, and my role in the weight room is a vessel to do that. Today, what I'll be sharing with you is how I determine what exercises and things I do to get better transfer to sport. Specifically, I'll refer to just frontal and transverse plane exercises, transverse plane examples. But for those of you that are looking how I came about this process and putting this system together, and just the people I've met along the way that have shaped my decision making. There's a number of athletes that I could definitely give credit to certain decisions I've made and changes I've made over the years, but these three are definitely ones that come out to mind. I won't give you the in-depth story on all of them, but John, for example, who's there squatting, he's got 425. I still remember the day he moved that with ease, and this was before we had our Tendo units and elite forms and things of that nature, so I don't have a velocity measure on it, but John was one of those individuals that, as a college pitcher, was a high school football player, stud athlete, super book smart, graduated through their Kelly School of Business, had all things going for him. And he came to me one day, and one of the things he asked was, hey, I played in the Cape Cod League, which is one of the premier summer ball leagues for those of you that do know. And he said, listen, I trust you so much, and this is why I'm talking to you. I'm watching guys do things better than I am. I know I'm stronger than them. I know I'm faster than them. Like, what else do you think it might be? And so he was one of many that just solidified the fact that of all the things that we do, bigger, faster, stronger is great, but sometimes they're strong enough. Or in a sense, sometimes getting stronger isn't what's going to be the piece of the puzzle. So it's got to be something deeper. John's the type of person that on one-on-one workouts, even though the school provides, he brought his own protein because he didn't want to leave things up to chance. On trips, he would pack his own lunch because, again, he didn't want to leave things up to chance as to what he might eat or be provided by the school. And so that was the kind of individual he was. It wasn't for lack of talent or anything. It was simply the fact that he wanted to find a way to get better. And so all these are great examples, and really success leaves clues. So I just use those examples as a way to use find a different lens to look at them, and then figure out what can I do differently, and ideally take all the examples I've ever had and just be more willing to change. So where I started this change process, it took a number of forms, obviously research and the things that we all do, but I recently listened to Bob Alejo in an interview, and one of the things he said was, tell me something that you're doing now and I'll tell you what we used to call it. So instead of going online, I turned to books, and one of the things that came up was just something that Bondarchuk put out as far as transfer of training to sport. And we as strength coaches, we live in the general prep area. That's stuff like our squat, lunge, all those patterns that we use all the time. But we move to specific preparatory when we do box jumps, med ball throws, Olympic variations, things of that nature. What I wanted to do is figure out how could I be somewhere in the middle, because track and field does a great job of obviously the event, the competitive, and the specific development. But when you look at other sports, they don't quite get there. In order to do that, I just looked at what are the things that make up specificity, and this is things that Prokoshansky has written about in depth, and basically just try and check as many of those boxes as possible. So to start, the goal is always the goal. I want everything we do to transfer to sport. And I try to keep that in mind with everything we're doing. So how do I take a freshman on the left who his first step looks like he's about to overstride and then put the brakes on, and turn him into an individual that can actually accelerate and do things that we want him to do? Um, just by looking at that, I decided, all right, the kneeling start might be a way to go about doing this. Okay. With the few examples I'll show today, I'm not going to get too in depth into what it is we do, but I will make a couple key points, which is we have to start somewhere. And the things that I chose were simple. It had to be easy to replicate. There had to be minimal coaching involved. And then it had to ultimately transfer to what it was that we were trying to do. And in this case, it's for baseball, it had to transfer to being able to laterally start, or our steel start, as some may call it. And everything that we decided to do from there on out had to have a progression. So there's Jeremy, and starting in that kneeling position. On the right, you see a number of individuals. We'll start off just driving forward into a wall and getting everybody to hold that position, which is sometimes a limiting factor. Other things that we've done is I started changing what we were doing and the level of detail we put into it. So many of you, we do different types of what I call unorthodox starts, whether it's a complete 180 and go, and you have your cat and mouse games where somebody's chasing, somebody's running. All those were great, but I took it a step further and decided, well, we need to start timing some of these things, because if I'm trying to get this to apply to an individual defensively, well, I've got to know whether he's faster to his left or to his right, and then make some of those changes in our programming to reflect what they were strong at and what they weren't. So that's where the implementation of certain strength speed and speed strengths exercises came in and just developed over time. And again, all of these have progressions in some way, shape, or form, whether it's from a snap down into a vertical jump or a box jump, or a single leg snap down that takes us into what I call hide-ins, or some of you might call skater jumps. Again, that also was reflected in some of our med ball throws and how we changed our variations. And I've spent a lot of time talking to coaches, and although it could be daunting to talk to a sport coach about some of the things they want to see in an athlete, I'm sure many of you have heard the term like, man, his core is too weak, or her core is too weak, or this or that. That's usually not the case, because you think, well, they can squat 400 pounds, their core is definitely not weak. It was a little less about that, and it was more about how do I now start to use our training to change movement patterns and then move forward from there. So this has gone into the weight room with a number of things we do. And I'll use this guy as an example. Paulie Milto as a senior pitcher for us. He started as a Friday night starter. Again, something like this simply only gets done with our upperclassmen. It's not something that, hey, it's fancy, it's cool, it's brand new. The basics are still the basics. It's definitely something that I make sure that all the freshmen know how to do, and moving upwards, all the upperclassmen value. But as you move forward and somebody gets quote unquote strong enough, it's time to start finding ways that we can get what we're already doing to transfer just a little bit more. As a result, all these things happen and in the weight room, but I'd kind of be remiss if I didn't mention that we try to do as much as possible to measure these. At Indiana University, we're fortunate we've got a lot of tools and toys, I like to call them, that we can measure things, and just creating key performance indicators. And these are meetings that I actually do have with coaching staffs. Those meetings revolve around what they see as valuable, and then I get to put my 2 cents in on how do I think I can apply those in the weight room. And then on top of that, how do I measure those? If we can measure them, we can see that an individual like this, who in August was clearly lacking in acceleration to his left side and hip mobility, that's where we're going to focus, as opposed to trying to get his squat any higher, trying to get his deadlift any higher, or maybe even doing a whole lot of acceleration work just on the ground, off the ground. So things along those lines. Success leaves clues. You watch those clues, and ideally, if you develop a system or a process that helps you measure and then helps you apply and then helps you keep yourself in line, you'll definitely come across a few things that you didn't know were there, and they'll be more apparent to you. Again, I could talk about this stuff for days. So if you guys do want to talk a little bit more about it, feel free. You can contact me via email. I'm somewhat active on social media, but the people I got to thank the most are obviously the student athletes that have helped me along the way. There's the number of professional athletes that have moved on, and just the discussions I have with them go beyond the weight room. And it's the mental side, and obviously my mentors, Indiana University, and all of you that are obviously hoping to learn more by watching talks like these. Thank you.
Coach Will Ali, thank you so much. It's a heck of a way to start off. Our second speaker is going to be, yes, let's give a round of applause. Yes. Thanks, Kevin. Second up is Coach Scott Caulfield of Colorado College. Coach, I'm turning it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Will. Nice job. And thanks to everybody at IU for asking me to be part of this. Really excited to be honored to be able to speak, and especially on a topic that I really find near and dear to my heart here. So let's see if we can make this full screen. Okay. So again, talking about coaching philosophy, and I think I mentioned coaching and training philosophy when I kind of posed this topic to Tom. I'm not putting this slide up to talk, just to brag about what I've done and where I've been, but more to think about if your coaching philosophy, is going to be kind of a guiding principle for you. It's going to evolve and it's going to change. And this top left, Norwich Cadets, that was the first team I ever worked with. I only worked with the rugby team. We only had outdoor training. We didn't get to use a weight room. Right. So the things that I was able to do and the resources I had were so different, and my philosophy, how I did what I did and why had to really evolve throughout time. Obviously, when I went to NSCA headquarters, we had a great 6,000 square foot facility. Now at CC, we've got a tremendous facility. where we're able to do a lot of different things. But, you know, it's going to ebb and flow. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, hopefully, that you get from this, is that your coaching philosophy isn't static. You're going to continue to look at it and evolve it as you go throughout your coaching career. And again, the main reason I like this slide and I love this quote, sanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So if we don't have some kind of clear concept or idea of why we do what we do, it's easy to fall into a pattern of just being caught up and doing things maybe for the wrong reasons, or maybe because you think you have the right reasons. Again, as strength and conditioning coaches, or any coach really, it's probably, you know, the question, or anybody, anytime I do this and you ask somebody, you know, have you heard that you should have a coaching philosophy? Every single coach has heard that throughout time. This is from NASB, which is now AFERD, but this was like the standards for all physical educators. And, you know, domain 1, standard 1 under philosophy and ethics was have an athlete-centered coaching philosophy. This is their 3rd edition of this, you know, standards for sport coaches. Obviously, not all sport coaches or any type of coaches, you know this. Or if we do know it, we don't necessarily know like how to do it, or where, you know, where we are guided to develop this. And I found that interesting as I started looking more into it. And so this, I won't spend a lot of time, but if you're, you know, at home and you're just sitting around, kind of think about, if I asked you these individually, what if I asked you to tell me some words when you think of philosophy, and if I change that and I say coaching philosophy, you know, what comes to mind there? And then finally, if I ask you what training philosophy, how that might differ. So think about what that might mean to you. Coaching is just teaching, right? We're training, we're explaining and demonstrating, changing behaviors, maintaining behaviors, developing, maintain. That's straight dictionary definitions. Mentoring obviously is a huge part of coaching. And philosophy, there's a lot of different takes on philosophy. A lot of different people have different thoughts about it, and nothing is right or wrong. I will say, you know, it's generally considered a pursuit of wisdom or some sort of study, right? Like number 2 of the philosophy of whatever. And then number 3, you'll see this again. So this is probably the most common, the most general beliefs, concepts, and attitudes of an individual or group. And I think that's where we see it in strength and conditioning as well. But again, one of the main reasons that I looked at this and thought about it more, so this is from the CSCS, Scientific Foundations, Exercise Science, Nutrition. If you look under that exercise science, these are all the areas that make up the test under exercise science. Philosophy is nowhere to be found on that list. And then if we go to the SCCC, Collegiate Strength Coaches Organization, again, portion of the written exam, all these different areas of exercise science. Well, there's no philosophy on there either. So why is it then that it's pretty commonly known that what's your philosophy is going to be the most common question you get asked in your job interview when you're interviewing for a strength and conditioning job? And I just found that funny, that we never have any preparation for it. Luckily in 2010, a buddy of mine, mentor of mine, Dr. Garrity, did a lit review in strength and conditioning literature on philosophy. And these are the main areas or buckets that he found. It meant some sort of system, a specific method. There's attitude, belief again, theory of training, or aim of training. And so then what I would say to you is, as you start thinking about this is, and this is not an all-encompassing list, this is my kind of just some general guidelines. How are these defined in your philosophy, right? Fun, competition, winning versus losing, success. I think all of us, right, as strength and conditioning professionals want to win. I think my best story or analogy, you know, of this is the first year that I worked with Dartmouth football, we were coming off their first 0-10 season in the history of the sport, right? So how does winning now on my, you know, core values or things that are important to me adjust when I know that we are not going to probably go from 0-10 to 10-0? It's probably unlikely, you know. So how does that adjust in your coaching philosophy? Or does it, you know, are you able to evolve it? What about things that could test your philosophy, depending on what level you're at. Parents, administrators, right? Depending on the level that you're at. Sport coaches, definitely going to test our philosophy. Tradition, outside distractions, boosters. If you're at a bigger school, that could probably be something that would test your philosophy. And the foundation of this philosophy, again, is going to be kind of values and beliefs, how you think about why you do what you do. I listed these in here. The highlighted ones, if you see, actually spells tigers, and that's on big letters in our weight room. And again, this is just my list. This isn't an all-encompassing list, but core values are your guiding principles that help you define what you do. And you don't necessarily need, if you stand for core values, I don't think you necessarily need to write them on the wall or tell people. I think we would know that about you because of what you do and how you do it. But there's also core values in training. All these different ones, education, training. We all know principle-based training. Coach Mack talks about that as well in his books. And again, beliefs, right? So our past experiences, our environment, like I talked about, working with Norwich Rugby, we had zero equipment, zero weight room, right? That influences how we train compared to now having every bell and whistle that we could want. And so that's why I broke it into training and coaching. And I think training is the what you do, and the coaching part is the why, okay? This is from an article that I wrote, and this is NSCA Coach 5.1. So if you're a member, you can get on and get access to this, or you can email me and I'll send it to you too. But I just came up with these different buckets on these two different columns about, again, the why and the how of the training philosophy versus coaching philosophy. And why is that important? Well, because sometimes we say things and it might actually show a misalignment in values. So, right, if we say showing up on time and timeliness is really important to us, but then we never really have any sort of punishment or any sort of repercussions for people showing up late, or we say we pride ourselves on safety, right, but then we don't teach proper lifting form or how to miss properly. So it shows a misalignment in our coaching philosophy. And again, it's an evolution of thinking about why you do what you do. I would recommend that if you're going to develop your coaching philosophy, you start out with a personal mission statement. And this is mine. And this has kind of been my standard mission statement, even before I, worked at Colorado College and added that in here. But educate, motivate, and inspire student athletes to enhance their physical and mental well-being through strength and conditioning. And that kind of tees up or heads off my coaching philosophy. And I think if you have a personal mission statement, just like an organization does or a business does, that kind of helps you, especially as you, are able to elaborate that and kind of, make that known, especially to coaches as well, to know why you do what you do. Here's some questions for people to think about. And again, I'm happy to share these. But if you're going to start evaluating your coaching philosophy and why you do what you do, what's your fundamental reason for being here besides making money? What are some things you do to know you're on purpose throughout the week? Things that you consider special in your life? What comes naturally to you? What do you consider your best achievements? What do you like best about your job? What do you like worst about your job? I think this is kind of a longer form version of my coaching philosophy, and then it has broken out bullet points. So just an example, this is actually an actual slide that I used in my job interview at Colorado College. And this is really helpful, I think, to show what you need to do and how you can develop your coaching philosophy and just break it out a little more simpler. You have a long form, but this is a more practical, digestible version for a lot of people. That's my 10 minutes. That was the quickest I've ever done that. But this is how to get my contact info. I spend way too much time on Instagram, so you can always catch me there. This is the crew. RIP to the old man down there in the middle front. He left us yesterday, so it's been a rough week, but I appreciate the opportunity and hope some people reach out to me afterwards.
Coach, I appreciate it. Sorry about the little one there. Fantastic presentation, though. We're going to go on third one up. Coach Megan Young, turn it over to you. You on here? Yes. Maybe.
Hey, Coach, I'm on here.
Oh, there you are. It's all yours, boss.
Cool. It just says the host has disabled me from screen sharing, so.
Oh. Chris, would you fix that? Bam. Thanks, Coach.
No problem. Sweet. Cool. Does that look all right? Okay, so what we're going to go on today is a lot of times when we talk about bringing in new information, new technology, we're always thinking of an athlete-centric model. And I just want to flip the script for a couple minutes today, and I want to talk about a coach-centric model. And a lot of what I spend time doing outside of my work is like, what can I do for myself to continue to evolve and learn and understand? And it has nothing to do with training, but it has everything to do with training. And the more authentic and real and aware you are as a person or human, the better of a coach you'll be or practitioner for any setting. So I like what Scott said when he's someone that I reach out to and talk a lot with. So anytime I'm putting together a presentation, I literally go, what would Scott say? So that's a good way to start prepping your presentations, is think, what would Scott say about this? And not NSCA Scott, this current Colorado College Scott. So the problem for me is I want to go over, we do a great job of educating others, but not necessarily implementing for ourselves. And I want to go over a story of like, what does that current model kind of look like? And then the third point is, it's up to us. No one else is going to help you help yourself. So it's up to us to help ourselves and then one another. And then I just want to throw out a challenge of like redesign of whatever this lifestyle of being a strength coach looks like. And maybe the current model doesn't make sense. And now can we have different conversation maybe over how to change it moving forward? Why does it matter? Some of you may know the name Matthew Walker. He wrote the book Why We Sleep. A lot of people have added that to their kind of education buckets. And I love this quote. He actually gave this quote for an interview with Wired magazine. He said, "Sleep loss will leak down into every nook and cranny of your physiology. Sleep, unfortunately, is not an optional lifestyle luxury. It's a non-negotiable biological necessity. It is your life support system." And so if we think of something as our life support system, and the reason I put over here next to it is like going into how that system functions, why do we so easily cut it? Why do we so easily give it to others? And that picture next to it, it represents in 2017, there was 3 Nobel laureates that were awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine for Physiology for their discoveries of molecular mechanisms controlling the circadian rhythm. So basically, they were able to peek inside our biological clock and determine how those inner workings are. So this comes down to some of the proteins in the systems that they found and say, how do these build up through the day? And then how do they degrade during night to allow for sleep to happen and kind of create that clock? So that's where that image comes from. So I love Dan McKim when he gets on Instagram and he is just so spot on like the power lifter, the CrossFitter. And so I thought I would do my best Dan McKim version of what the energy drink AM and the unwind PM strength coach is like. And we all know those coaches that need literally that picture image at the bottom. They're chugging the caffeine throughout the day, and then they turn to the alcohol or the wine or the maybe even sleep aid, the Ambien at night. Why is that a problem? Well, first of all, caffeine doesn't actually increase your alertness. What caffeine does is it works to help decrease your sleep heaviness. So that there's a chemical that we can talk about that increases sleep pressure. All caffeine does is decrease that. So it's not actually making you feel less tired. It's messing with the chemical inner workings to say you have less sleep pressure. So that's why people over time feel like they build a resiliency to caffeine. They just now associated this sleep pressure modulator and say, now I need Adderall on top of that. I need a different pre-workout on top of that. And that's where we get into some damaging things and talking about it. There was a great interview, and this is where some of these numbers come from, with Dr. Parsley, with Kelly Starlett, that they did on a live. And I literally sat there dictating the whole thing because he is a sleep expert that's worked with a lot of operators, special warfare guys. And when we talk about what sleep is for, if you think about deep sleep, the best way I've ever heard it said is it's the exact opposite of fight or flight. So everything that needs to be restorative, from digestion to tissue, and we know this for athletes, but if we think about it from a human level, how important it is, maybe that'll start reshaping of why this should be a non-negotiable for you. Alcohol in small amounts removes 30 to 40% of your deep sleep. And small amounts is different per person, sure, but it's less than you think. So now if you're adding in alcohol to help you get to sleep, you're not really sleeping as well as you think you are. You're just passing out so that you're less aware of what your reality is. Basically, you're numbing your prefrontal cortex. And then, so let's say also you had to pop some Ambien, some sleep drugs. This is not talking about melatonin as a supplement. This is talking about drugs. Now you're going to lose 70, 80% of your REM sleep, which is where we drive over to memory. We have dream states. That's what's happening in that rapid eye movement. So imagine now you've just had 3 days of where you really struggled to sleep. So you're relying on sleep drugs. And let's say you're also having a boys weekend or girls weekend out, and you're drinking a little bit, and then all of a sudden you come back to work on Monday. Well, what's going to drive your decision making now is stress hormone. And if we're driving caffeine, which blocks our adenosine response, so your brain is using your prefrontal cortex to determine your reality, is already impaired. So now I'm saying my brain is impaired, I'm having less sleep. What kind of decisions am I making? So maybe this is starting to build up for you why this is kind of like a deadly picture to play with. And if I'm a sport coach, I can start to understand, man, am I making less efficient and effective in-game decisions because I'm using a stress hormone response to drive decision making in an altered reality instead of being able to be fully present and aware. So that's kind of the story of that. I just wanted to share, what are the solutions? How do we help with this? And this is some of the things that you'll say to your athletes, like cut out caffeine and alcohol. Well, there's plenty of alternatives now that I wanted to kind of pin to you. It's like 4-Sigmatic and some of the mushroom coffees and teas, and adaptogen teas can give you some of the same responses of what you're looking for to make sure that you still feel like there's something for you to drink when you wake up in the morning. There's also a big link between people using caffeine and having links to anxiety, even at sub levels and acutely, and then building into chronically. So if you're someone, you're like, man, I don't know why I have this underpinning anxiety. A lot of times we just bucket it off to the stress of our job. Well, maybe there's actually a trigger that's causing that state in your physiology. Going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time every morning, even on weekends. This is so hard when you're the young coach and you get 2 days off in a row and you're like, I'm sleeping till 2 p.m. Well, I'm challenging you to start reframing why that may be important. And then solution 3, this goes a lot into what Dr. Huberman's research out of Stanford is saying, is we need to spend morning sunlight, evening sunlight outside. And then I'll go into some different research over like the different types of light. And blue light blockers, these are blue light blocker glasses. There's plenty of different types of ones. There's one with orange lenses that are going to be a little bit better than these that look semi-okay. So just thinking about different solutions like that. This is just going into testing the prototype. Scientists believe that your exposure to bright blue light, rich white light during the day, and softer amber hues at night can help restore your natural circadian rhythm. So just like respiration is a trick for our chemistry of our internal environment and being able to downregulate, light is also a trigger, an outward trigger that we can use as an input to reset our circadian rhythm. So if you're a coach, maybe as a staff, now you're talking of why it's important to go out to practice is also so that you're getting some natural light throughout the day if there's not lights in your weight room. Maybe it becomes a point where your staff meetings now take place outside and maybe you don't need computers for them. And I love technology. I just want to dive into, when we talk about how do we become better at anything, I love being able to assess, understand, and develop. So in building a system for understanding myself, I use an aura ring, but I just threw it on here so we would know, and I'm not going to read through this, of when you use PSG as a gold standard, what we're sacrificing using fatigue science or aura ring or some of these smaller footprint technologies, we are giving up a lot. But what are we giving that we know we can measure? So in closing in all of this, I want you to do your own research so that you involve your own understanding of you as a person instead of just for your athletes, because the more involved you are as a person and as a human, be curious, ask more questions. Do you want to dive into why your Oura Ring HRV is different and what that's developed? So creating a behavior change model with some threshold markers for you is going to be key. And then if you can assess and monitor these things over time, there's really good trend analysis that you can start to look in and say, well, my non-negotiable is actually, if I know I'm going to have 3 games and we're going to be going on a long weekend, here's what I need to do on the front end, and here's what I'm going to do recovery-wise for myself because of that. And then maybe now we start to design and discuss our lifestyles a little bit differently. Maybe conferences are less about having meetings inside and more about just creating engagements to where we can still get some sunlight. And then I just wanted to allow you all to reflect and challenge the status quo of like, why do we have to get up early? Why do we have to sacrifice so much to do the job that we do? Can it be a type of thing where as coaches now we can understand, can we build better systems throughout the summer of being able to create consistent schedules? Can we work with coaches and develop better schedules for our athletes, but also for ourselves? So I just want to say thank you for you guys for allowing me to come talk and kind of just bring this idea to light. And a lot of it, I will say, in the pro setting is different than college, and being able to have these type of conversations is different with adults than teenagers. But it's something that even my coaching staff has dived into, and they appreciate for themselves and being able to make better decisions, and why it's important to, hey, if you have to watch film at night, throw in those glasses. If you need to do this, do this. So creating a better input-output system. And I just want to say thank you to the Indiana staff for allowing me to come on and just share some of my thoughts around this. And I am on social media and all that, just coach_Meg. I'm happy to talk about sleep and obviously dive in deeper to any of this.
Coach, thank you so much. Incredible stuff. Big virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. I want to just remind everybody, any questions you have, by all means, just drop them in the chat on there. Next up on the list is going to be Kevin Kunapasik from Indiana University. Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tom. I'm just getting my screen pulled up here. Okay. Again, thanks, Tom. And first and foremost, I hope you all can hear me with my internet connection and stuff. First thing I just wanted to do was thank you guys for all coming out, because I think this is a incredible opportunity that our staff try to put together for coaches like myself to present stuff that I might be interested in. And so I just want to really thank you guys for all this. So like Tom said, my name is Kevin Kunapasik, and I am the Director of Athletic Performance here at Indiana for the basketball team. I've been in Indiana for 7 years now, and and this is my 4th season with the women's basketball team. So I also have men's and women's swimming as well. So basketball isn't my only responsibility here. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about one of my favorite tools in the toolbox, and that's the VersaClimber. So, and more in particular, how I use it to help condition my basketball team. So I also want to preface this by saying I'm not a guru or anything. I'm not the Versa guy. I'm not a conditioning genius or anything, but this is just some stuff that I've figured out and messed around with that I think shows the value that I can implement with my teams here in Indiana. And specifically what I want to talk to you guys about is why I like the VersaClimber and why I use it, how I build a session, a conditioning session, and how I try and use that to mimic the sport of basketball. And then I just want to show you some heart rate data that compares a conditioning session that I've written to an actual basketball practice. So first and foremost, why the VersaClimber? So it's minimal impact on their body. So if you think about a basketball practice or just basketball in general, they spend hours upon hours on the hardwood court, running up and down, jumping, sprinting, all that stuff. So I think the Versa is a great tool to take some of that added impact out when you do a conditioning session. So it kind of saves the athlete's knees, hips, the ankles, and backs from added impact. Also, I think it's super efficient. So you can get a really good workout in about 20 to 30 minutes, which is really important as a strength and conditioning coach. When I'm only given about an hour per session, I can't spend all that time just on a lift or just on a conditioning. So if you guys haven't been on it, you also know it's efficient in getting your heart rate up super, super quick. If you've ever been on the Versa before, it only takes about a minute or so for you to have that heart rate up in your throat and really feel like not wanting to do it anymore. So it's super efficient in that way as well. Also, I think it's a great challenge for the athletes. I think as coaches, if you ever prescribed the Versa in any of your conditioning sessions, you can always think about that freshman or incomer that has never used it before, and how they have like the little leg shakes or the quiver after they get off it for the first time or have a couple sprints. But I like that challenge for them because that athlete can come back the next year or even months later and see the other incomer freshman come in and struggle the way they had, and now they're crushing it. So I think it's a great challenge for them, and they can realize the progress that they can make in just a short amount of time. So what do I look at when I build a conditioning session? So first and foremost, I have to take into account the energy demands of the sport. So when I think of basketball, I think of it as a repeated sprint sport. So what I mean by that is that there's a ton of explosive movements strung together in a row. So they're asked to change direction really fast, accelerate, decelerate, jump, sprint. All of these anaerobic demands are strung together, and then they're asked to do it for over a long period of time. So it's very important to be able to also build an aerobic base. So I try to make this the best I can in any conditioning session that I write. So if we want to look over to the right here at my couple graphs I have, this is just some heart rate data that I've taken from a preseason practice from earlier this year. So I want to start by focusing on the top portion of this graph. And I just use polar heart rate monitors. Very simple, very basic stuff, but I'll explain what it is if you're not familiar with it. So what polar does, it puts it into different zones, and each zone is a color. So these zones are based off of the athlete in particular's maximum heart rate. So for this example, this athlete here, their max heart rate is 200 beats per minute. So then each zone is based off of that. So the red zone is 90% of that max heart rate. So for instance, this athlete, her max heart rate is 200. If her heart rate gets over 180 beats per minute, she's in the red zone. Okay, and then if you look at the orange, orange is 80% of the max heart rate. So if it's over 160 beats per minute, she's in the orange zone. And I focus more on these two zones than anything else because I feel like that's what dictates the intensity of that practice or a conditioning session that I might write. So I look at the orange because once you have a heart rate monitor on and you hit the orange zone, you realize it's not comfortable. It hurts. It sucks. It's not fun anymore. So that's when it becomes difficult. So when we look at this practice in particular, it sucked. It is a long practice. It was 2 hours and 20 minutes total time. And of that 2 hours and 20 minutes for this athlete, she spent 1 hour and 25 minutes of that time in the orange or red zone, so in an uncomfortable state. So it was a very, very intense practice. So if you look at the lower graph there, that's just their heart rate over time. And what I want you to look at here is the hour mark, so the 60-minute mark here, and anything after that. So this practice was intense because it was a preseason practice, and we scrimmaged for a vast majority of the time. We brought in refs, and we played actual games. So those scrimmages started at that 60-minute mark. So what I want you to notice here is the peaks and valleys that occur when you're actually playing a basketball game. So her heart rate will elevate and then it will decrease very quickly. Elevate, decrease very quickly. So that's what the sport of basketball is like. And I try to replicate that when I construct a conditioning session on the Versa. So how do I try and do that? This is just an example of a conditioning session that I've written. So I try and do high intensity efforts ranging from 30 seconds to 1.5 minutes Now that might change. I've had longer than a minute and a half. I've had shorter than 30, but those are just kind of averages that I probably stick to. And then I just adjust the work to rest ratio to dictate the intensity of the conditioning session. So a common thing, a staple of my program would be every minute on the minute doing a 100-foot sprint. A 100-foot sprint will take you about 30 seconds. They have the rest of the time to recover, and they're back on the VersaClimber after that 30-second bout, or whatever the rest is. So for this session in particular, we did 4 reps of 200 feet sprints, 6 reps of 100, and then 5 reps of 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off of a Tabata. So if you look over at the printout there, the total duration of the workout was about 30 minutes long. This athlete in particular spent about 20 minutes of that time in either the orange or red zone. So it was very intense. It was a difficult workout. And then if you look at the bottom there of the heart rate, actual heart rate graph, you'll see the peaks and valleys, and then some of the work capacity stuff at the end where the heart rate is staying up. But the last point I have there is make it hard. I say that because the practice that was on the previous slide, an hour and 25 total minutes of intense work, that's hard. So you have to make your conditioning sessions difficult in order to prepare their bodies to be ready to do that. So I'm a firm believer in you have to make it hard in order for it to translate over to their sport. And then that leads me to the last question that I've constantly asked myself, and that is, do my conditioning sessions prepare the athletes for the practices and games that they're going to have to endure? So I've been training women's basketball now for 4 seasons, and I never really had any concrete data when I asked that question to myself early on. So I decided to have them start wearing some heart rate monitors just because I thought things were helping, but I could never, people asked me, I could never really pinpoint like, yes, this is really helping them. So what I have here are 2 graphs. The first one on the left there is the exact same conditioning session that I just showed you on the previous slide. And then the one on the right is the same athlete going through an individual court workout with her coach. So an individual session that was 30 minutes long, just one-on-one working on basketball drills with her coach. And what I want to look at here is that the intensities of these graphs are pretty damn near close to identical. So when I looked at that and I first saw that, it kind of validated things for me when I'm looking at building a conditioning workout and saying, wow, that was actually pretty similar to what they're going to experience on the court. So by looking at these graphs, I can almost conclude that what I'm doing is at least transferring to the court in some sort of way, whether that is just a feeling, they feel the same when they're on the versus doing a conditioning workout, and the same to when they were on the court actually going through the basketball training as well. So I can say with some utmost certainty that for our program at Indiana, that I am at least gearing a conditioning session that is close to what they're going to be doing on the court. And that's all. I know it was kind of a lot of information, or really quick. So if you guys do have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out. My email, Instagram, and Twitter are all on there. You can hit me up on any one of those. But again, thank you guys so much. And I encourage you guys to reach out to Indiana Strength if you want to be a part of this. I think this can be a very good platform for especially young coaches like myself to share information that they're interested in. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Coach. We got big virtual round of applause. Thank you, sir. We got Coach Ron McKeefery on, but I'm not sure if Coach got out of meeting yet. Coach, you out there? I know he's had a busy afternoon or busy morning out in Fresno State. We'll give him about 10 more seconds here. And if Coach doesn't get on, what we're going to have Coach Virtue. He's the one that hosted last week. He's the one that hosted our the climb versus the summit, and has always got something interesting to say. Chris, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Why don't you be the filler for the day?
All right. Yeah, if Coach, I apologize if Coach McCreefrey doesn't hop on here in a second. If you guys got to get it going, go ahead. But I'm going to go ahead and talk for a little bit about volleyball and how we train here at volleyball, how we're using velocity-based training here. So I apologize. I'm not as good looking as Coach McKeefrey, but I'm going to share a screen, so you're not going to be able to see much of me anyway. So let me pull up my screen. I apologize. I didn't have this prepared in a presentation format, so I'm just going to go through my PDF here. If you don't see it, let me know. If anything goes wrong with my video, let me know. But thank you, Tom, for the introduction and the time. So the way we train volleyball here a little bit in the weight room, I call it power state training. We use the elite form here at Indiana. And actually, we just got it installed last year. Half the weight room was installed for football because our former strength coaches that are now at Alabama, they brought that with them, and they brought a style of training. And if you're a coach out there and you're kind of set in your ways, you know, when you hear new things or stuff that's added on and you don't have it in your program, you're like, oh, that could be interesting. You know, go ahead and hop on that train and at least try it out or give it a look, because even when we had heard of elite form a while ago, and we had been doing a form of velocity-based training with our 10 new units and things of that nature. But talking with Coach Ballou and Coach Ray and how they kind of progressed their program and they use this data, this is just an amazing amount of data. It's kind of revolutionized some of our training, which is fantastic. And that's the reason why they are where they are right now. But so we use the elite forms, and with volleyball, I'm gonna do my best to scroll through this. There we go. So you have your power movements, your strength movements, and then the velocity at which you track it. You could do this with a 10-year unit. You can do it with the elite form. But those are kind of the parameters we're looking at, or we base our movements on here. Now, with that, what I want to do is kind of do an auto regulation with the girls, or with the women, as far as how they're training and how we're progressing our training. So we're going to be going off of the subjective regulators, you know, how hard it was, you know, how many reps more could you have done, how'd that feel as we're going through, and then the objective stuff, which is we're getting from the data, the velocity, the percentages, anytime we're doing max sets or the failure sets or any kind of testing that we do. What I'm trying to find is this flow state, or what we call the power state. So it's this optimal area of training to where the intensity is not too high, but also the challenge is not too low. So we're trying to find that just enough excitement at where they're at in their bodies that day. And that's where the auto regulation comes in. So you could have an athlete that's just, you know, we might be in season and they're feeling good that day, and all of a sudden their numbers go through the roof on the prescribed sets that we have that day, whether it be a clean squat, whatever it is. And why hold that athlete back if their body at that time is possessing more? Now, there could be times where you have a percentage on there, say the load factor is 75%, whatever it is, and they come in and they're just not performing. Now you got to look into and use your experience. Is that a motivation factor? Is that an injury factor? Or is that just their body is not at a certain ready state? You know, they're not recovered, like Coach Young was talking about. Is their recovery not on point? Do I want to push that athlete through that and risk an injury in the weight room, especially when we're in season? Or do I want to make adjustments as we go along and auto-regulate that based off the data that we're getting right away? So when I track this, I'm looking at the percentage, like they're looking at the velocity, as we're going along, and they're trying to beat a certain prescribed velocity. But then as we go and we collect data, then we're going to go into peak power. So it doesn't matter whether the load is at 65%, at 85%. We're going for that peak power number as we progress through the week. So it's not last week they cleaned 135 for 3 reps, and now we're going to do 140 for 3 reps. It's last week you had 135, your peak power was at 209.6. This week it's good. We got to beat that. And that gives them, as they're pulling those numbers up and they're hitting that live, they know the number they got to beat. And it's just an extra motivation factor. You're getting a little bit more juice out of them, and they can see exactly where their effort is going. And it's an amazing effect that it has on the athletes, because these kids are competitive and they're elite, and they want to be elite and they want to get better. So instead of just looking, oh, I did 135 for 3 reps, it's like, oh, I want to beat my powerlifting number this week. And then what we do is we throw that up against the whole team, and now you create competition amongst the entire team. And, you know, we got trash talking back and forth. You know, I have the highest peak on deadlift, or I have the highest peak on clean and stuff. And then you have ways to, when you're evaluating the athlete, saying, you know, your clean here is great, but your squat, this is where your numbers are compared on the team, or even you in the past. What are the things that we need to work on? Some kids need to get more powerful. They need to work on that quick twitch. Some need to get stronger. Some need to develop range of motion. So all those factors go into it when we're looking for that power state. And then as we're going along, we're also using, we have force stacks. Some people have Sparta as far as the power plate system that we're looking at. And again, you could pull so many parameters or metrics from those systems. But as we go through, we're kind of just tracking 5 things, 3 performance metrics: concentric mean power, the relative strength index, and the vertical velocity at takeoff, but then also their readiness or fatigue metrics. So their flight time in ratio to their contraction time, and then their eccentric duration. We're going to track this as we go along. So some people get, what we say, paralyzed by the data. I'd rather just have all the data. And then when things come up, or you hear, like, because you're a strength coach, you're around all these kids all the time, and you hear everything, you know what's going on. You're kind of the center of the hourglass between the athletes and the coaches. When you hear things, whether it's from the coach, whether it's from the athlete, you can use that subjective, or you can go to the objective data and say, no, yeah, they're trending in the right way, or they're trending in the wrong way. And we got to correct that soon. We got to correct that fast. And what are we doing in the weight room, or talking to our athletic trainers, or talking to the sports psychologist to correct that? So as we're going along, we're just looking at these performance metrics compared to the fatigue metrics, and then making sure that we're in the green, making sure that we're progressing at the correct rate, and we're not going in the wrong direction. And even when we do that, like if you're looking at this, athlete A has a couple metrics in the red. So we're going to look at it a little bit. Athlete D, couple metrics in the red, performance metrics in the red a little bit, but their fatigue is not, their fatigue is fine. So we might have a conversation with athlete B. We're going to have an intervention. Something's going on there, whether it's they're not sleeping, they're not eating right, mentally they're not in the right place. So using this data, we want to make sure that, there may be things that we don't see with the eye in our experience. So if while collecting the data, it helps, so I'm not as much of an intervention with athlete A or athlete D. Athletes C and E are on the right track, but athlete B, we're going to have a conversation with. We're going to sit down and we're going to see how we can help, and not necessarily an intervention with a coach or anything like that, because the kids, it as well as I do. They're very wary with some of this data. It's like, oh, you're going to use this against us. You're going to give it to the coaches. All this stuff stays with me and the athletic trainer and the sports psychologist. So that way there's a trust factor there. And then you got to know where we start from. So here at Indiana, we created the Hoosier Performance Index, and I'm sure you all have some form of this as far as your testing and where they're at. But every athlete that comes through the volleyball program gets tested in certain metrics. I'm just going to sprint through this a little bit. So instead of taking so many tests, kind of like the power plates, we're looking at 5 factors. When we're doing our pre-testing here, and it could be a little bit different with different sports, but we're looking at the vertical jump, the 1-rep max clean, the 10-yard sprint, and the pro agility. From that, we have a scoring system that's based on, we have an algorithm that's based on height, weight, and their performance in these tests. So that way you don't have someone that's 6'2", moving a lot of weight when the 150-pound, 5'3" person is actually stronger. So being able to use height and weight into our index, so that way each athlete gets a feel for where they are compared to them, as opposed to the rest of the team with this kind of initial stuff. And then we'll retest on this beginning of each semester, end of each semester, going into preseason, things of that nature. But that way, every athlete has an idea, I'm good at the vertical jump, I'm good at the clean, so my power is where it's at, but my 10-yard sprint, so my acceleration and my pro agility, my change of direction may not be where it needs to be, so that's what we need to work on. So just as we're going through that, these are some of the parameters we use, we test, we gather as much data as we can without getting paralyzed by it, and then using our experience, using that data in the best way possible with the full trust of the athlete as well. So don't want to take too much of your time, just spitballing a little bit of stuff out there. If you have any questions, like the other coaches said, just let me know, throw it in the chat. And Tom, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thanks, Chris. Awesome. Well, coaches, I want to thank you all for incredible presentations. Absolutely, great stuff, and the flow of it was so good. Audience, everybody that's out there, we're going to keep this chat open for about 5 more minutes. So any questions you have, please drop it in there. All these videos we're going to post on indianastrength.com. So all these different videos will be up there. And what we're going to do is try and take your questions and then get the coaches to answer them as time goes on. We're doing this every Wednesday. We're going to have a lot of great speakers. If you're interested in speaking, or if you just want to chime in, get on here, by all means, please do so. This is going to be something that's going to continue to grow, and it's going to be a great place to be, to gain a lot of knowledge. So I wish you all safe health and many opportunities to grow. But from there, I'll thank everybody one last time, and then we'll sign off. And until we see each other on Wednesday again, thank you all.